I am 90 years old, and I have been sitting in this chair for the better part of the morning trying to find the right place to start. Not because I don't know what I want to say. I know exactly what I want to say. I've known it for years now. The problem is that when you wait too long to say something, it starts to feel heavy in a way that's hard to explain. Like a stone you've been carrying so long you forgot it wasn't part of you. So let me just start. Let me just say it the way it is. I learned, too late, what silence costs. Not the comfortable kind of silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, or the stillness before sleep. I mean the silence that becomes a habit. The silence that takes the place of the things you should have said. The things you kept telling yourself you'd say tomorrow, or after the kids grew up, or once things settled down, or when the time felt right. That kind of silence. The kind that builds a wall one day at a time. So slowly that you don't even see it going up. Until one day you reach out for someone and the wall is already there. I grew up in a house where men didn't talk. Not about anything real, anyway. My father was a quiet man. Not cold exactly, but contained. He worked hard, came home tired, sat in his chair, and that was that. You knew he loved you because he fed you and kept the lights on. You didn't need him to say it. That's what I was taught, more by example than by words. And I carried that into my own life without even questioning it. It just felt normal. It felt like what a man was supposed to be. I was 24 when I got married. Her name was Ruth. She had this laugh that could fill a whole room, and she talked the way some people sing. Like the words just came naturally and easily and without any hesitation. She was everything I wasn't in that way. And I think part of why I loved her was because she was so open when I didn't know how to be. She said things. She asked questions. She wanted to know what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what I dreamed about at night. And I didn't know how to answer her. Not really. I would say something short, something safe, something that didn't ask much of either of us. And she would smile a little, like she was patient, like she knew one day I'd learn to open up. I think she waited a long time for that. We had 2 children, a boy first, then a girl. I worked. I worked a lot. Not because I didn't care about them. I want to be clear about that. I worked because I believed that was how love looked. You showed up for work. You paid the bills. You made sure there was food on the table and shoes on their feet and opportunities you never had. That was love. That was what I understood love to be. I missed things. I know that now. I'm not sure I fully knew it then, or maybe I knew it and told myself it was necessary. There were birthdays where I came home late. School plays where I sat in the back and had to leave before the end. Dinners where I was there in body but somewhere else in my head, thinking about a problem at work or a bill that was coming or something that needed fixing. My son used to wait by the window for me. Ruth told me that years later. He used to sit there looking out for my car. I didn't know that at the time. Or maybe I did, and I didn't let myself feel it because feeling it would have meant changing something. Work was safe. Work was straightforward. You put effort in, and you got results out. You could measure it, see it, point to it and say, look what I did, look what I built. The other things, the conversations that went nowhere, the feelings that didn't have names, the slow work of knowing another person and letting them know you, that was harder. It was harder, and I didn't have the tools for it. Or maybe I had the tools and just never picked them up. I'm still not sure which. The years went by the way years do when you're not watching them. One at a time, they don't seem like much. You don't feel them going. You just wake up one day and you're 50 and then 60. And your children are grown and your hair is gray and you look across the table at your wife and realize there's a distance between you that you couldn't point to the beginning of if you tried. We weren't unhappy. I want to say that clearly. We weren't miserable people in a bad marriage. We were 2 people who had shared a life together, who had raised children and weathered hard times and made it through. But somewhere in there, the real conversation had stopped. The kind where you say what you actually mean. The kind where you sit with someone's pain instead of trying to fix it or move past it. The kind where you say, "I'm scared too," or "I don't know what I'm doing either," or "I've been thinking about my father, and I can't quite explain why it still hurts after all these years." I never said those things. Not to Ruth, not to my children, not to anyone. My son grew up and moved across the country. He built a life out there, a good one. We talked on the phone every few weeks. Holidays, birthdays, the usual things. He was a good son. He called. He visited when he could. But there was something between us that was never quite easy. A slight formality, like two people who know they're supposed to be close, but have never quite figured out how to get there. I used to think it was just the way things were between fathers and sons. I told myself that was normal. Maybe for some families it is. But I think for us, it was something I had made. Slowly, and without meaning to, through all the years of not quite being present, not quite opening up, not quite letting him see who I actually was beneath the role of father and provider. He didn't know me, and I realized much too late that I didn't really know him either. We had kept a respectful and comfortable distance from each other for so many years that neither of us knew how to close it. My daughter was different. She tried harder. She asked questions like her mother had. She pushed a little. She would call and want to talk about real things, not just the surface things, and I would answer her the same way I always answered everyone. Carefully, briefly, without quite giving her anything real to hold on to. I love her. She knows that, but I don't think she's ever known me the way she wanted to. And I have thought about that more than I can say. Ruth died 7 years ago. She had been sick for a while, longer than either of us admitted out loud, which I suppose was fitting in a sad way. We spent her last year together, more present than we had been in decades, sitting together, holding hands, saying things that should have been said 30 years before. She told me once, near the end, that she had never stopped waiting for me to show up. Not physically. I was there physically, but the other way. The way she had always wanted. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't, completely. I just held her hand and said I was sorry. And I meant it in a way I had never meant anything in my life. And she looked at me and she nodded. And I think she forgave me. I hope she did. But she was also right. And the rightness of it didn't go away just because we said it out loud. She died 3 weeks after that conversation. And I sat in the house we had shared for 51 years, completely alone in a way I had never felt alone before. Because before, even when I had kept my distance, she was there. She filled the space I couldn't fill. She kept the family connected and warm and talkative in ways I never could. When she was gone, I understood for the first time how much of what I thought of as our life had actually been her work, her effort, her presence. I had let her carry almost all of it. My children came and stayed for a while after the funeral. My grandchildren were there, these beautiful young people I realized I barely knew, because I had never made the effort to know them. They were polite with me, kind, but a little careful, the way you are with someone you're not quite sure about, someone whose rhythms you don't know well enough to relax around. And I saw it clearly then, that careful distance, and I knew it was mine. I had built it, one quiet year at a time. After everyone went home, I sat in the evenings alone and tried to figure out when exactly it had happened. When the silence had started. When the habit of not saying things had taken root deeply enough that I couldn't find the beginning of it anymore, and I couldn't locate it. It wasn't one decision. It wasn't one moment. It was every small choice to say less than I meant, every time I nodded instead of answered. Every time someone asked how I was and I said fine when I wasn't. Every time I let a conversation end before it got to anything real, because the real part felt too uncharted and too uncomfortable. It was 1,000 small silences, and they had added up to a life where the people who loved me most knew me the least. My son came to visit last year, just him, without his family. He said he wanted to spend some time with me, which surprised me a little. We sat on the porch for 2 days, and somewhere in the middle of the second day, he started talking about when he was a child, about things he remembered, about the window, which he mentioned without knowing Ruth had told me about it, about how he used to want to show me his drawings and wouldn't because he thought I'd find them a waste of time, about how he'd become an engineer partly because he thought it was what I would respect. I listened to him talk for a long time, and then I told him I was sorry. And I told him some things I had never said, about my own father, about what I had carried from that house into ours, about how I had not known how to do differently, even when part of me knew I should. And he listened, and by the end of it, we were both very quiet, in a way that felt different from my usual quiet. It felt like something had been put down. He cried a little. I'm not ashamed to say I did too. We are closer now than we have ever been. It is real between us in a way it never quite was, and I am grateful for that. I hold on to that. But I also know what it took to get there. It took Ruth dying. It took me being this age with this little time left. It took him flying across the country to sit on a porch and say things we should have said when he was 20 and I was 45 and we still had everything ahead of us. That is the cost. That's what I mean when I say silence has a cost. You don't pay it all at once. You pay it slowly. You pay it in the relationships that stay polite instead of becoming deep. In the children who love you but don't quite know you. In the spouse who forgave you but who you know, in the quiet hours, carried a loneliness you could have helped with and didn't. In the version of yourself that you never quite showed anyone, that you kept packed away where it was safe, that now, at 90, you understand was the most important thing you had to offer. I think about the conversations I didn't have. That sounds strange, I know, to grieve something that never happened, but they're with me. The night I came home, and my daughter was crying, and I asked what was wrong and she said nothing. And I accepted that because accepting it was easier than pressing. I have thought about that night many times. What would have happened if I had sat down next to her? If I had said, "It doesn't look like nothing," and waited. If I had just waited. I think about the things Ruth said to me over the years that I answered with a nod. The questions she asked that I answered without really engaging. The time she wanted to talk at night, and I said I was tired. I was tired. That part was true. But I was also afraid of something I couldn't name. Afraid of the openness. Afraid of not knowing what to say. Afraid of being seen as less than I was supposed to be. So I was tired instead. Tired was easier. There is a version of my life where I learned this earlier, where someone sat me down when I was 30 or 40 and helped me understand that the silence I thought was strength was actually absence. That presence isn't just being in the room. That listening isn't just waiting for the other person to finish. That love, real love, requires you to be known and to know, and that the work of it is daily and unglamorous and worth everything. Nobody told me that. Or maybe they tried and I didn't hear them. My wife tried in her way. A few friends tried over the years. I thought they were being sentimental or soft. I thought I understood what mattered and I was doing it. I was providing. I was responsible. I was dependable. I was also, in all the ways that would matter later, absent. I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel sorry for me. I don't. My life has had real things in it. Real love, even if I didn't always honor it well enough. Real moments, even if I let too many of them pass without being fully in them. I have grandchildren who exist because my children were raised with enough to go on, even if it wasn't everything. I had a woman who loved me for 50 years and died holding my hand. I have my son, who came back to that porch, who was willing to try. But I have also lived long enough to see what I missed, and I want to be honest about that. I think honesty is one of the few things I have left to give. If you are in the middle of your life right now, I want to say something to you, not as instruction, just as something I know now that I wish I had known then. The people around you are trying to reach you. They are asking in small ways, not always with words, to be let in and to feel like they matter to you beyond the role they play in your life. Your spouse wants to know what you actually think. Your children are watching you for clues about who you are, about what it looks like to be a person moving through the world. Your friends, the ones who have stayed, want more than the surface version of you, and you have more to give than you might think. The parts of yourself you keep private because they feel uncertain or unfinished or too complicated to explain, those parts are not weaknesses. They are what makes you a person and not just a function. They are what makes you someone worth knowing. The silence feels like protection. It feels like you're holding yourself together. It might even feel like consideration, like you're not burdening anyone. But it doesn't protect you. It just delays the cost. And the cost comes eventually, one way or another. In a relationship that never got as deep as it could have. In a child who loves you, but doesn't quite trust you with their real self because you never offered yours. In an evening alone, at a certain age, when you finally understand what the quiet was covering. I am 90 years old. My knees don't work well, and I sleep more than I used to. And there are days when I am tired in a way that has nothing to do with exertion. The time I have is what it is. I've made my peace with that mostly. But I think about Ruth. I think about the years between us, when the distance was there, and neither of us knew quite how to cross it. I think about my son at the window. I think about my daughter asking questions I didn't answer fully. And I think, if I could go back to any of it, I wouldn't try to fix the big things. I wouldn't overhaul myself or become someone different. I would just try to say a little more, stay in the room a little longer, ask one more question, let one more silence turn into something real instead of letting it just stay silence. That's all. It's not complicated, the thing I'm trying to say. It just took me 80 years to understand it. If any part of this landed somewhere in you, if it brought someone to mind, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, something you've been meaning to say, I hope you don't wait as long as I did. I'm not telling you what to do with your life. You'll figure that out. But I am telling you, from the other side of it, that the moments you have right now with the people you love are real, and they are not guaranteed, and they are worth more than the silence that's easier to keep. I'll leave it at that. There is something else I want to say before I finish. Something I kept circling around but never quite landed on. And I think it matters. So I'm going to try. For most of my life I believed that silence was neutral, that it wasn't doing anything, that it was simply the absence of noise, the absence of words. And that absence, by definition, couldn't hurt anyone. I held on to that belief the way you hold on to something that makes your choices feel reasonable. Because if silence was neutral, then I wasn't doing anything wrong by keeping it. I was just being quiet, just being private, just being the kind of man I had always been. But silence is not neutral. I know that now with a certainty that sits in my chest like something solid. Silence is a choice, same as speaking is a choice, and it carries the same weight. Maybe more, because at least when you speak, you give the other person something to work with. When you stay silent, you leave them to fill the space themselves. And people fill silence with whatever they already fear. A child fills it with the thought that they are not interesting enough to ask about. A wife fills it with the thought that she is not important enough to confide in. A friend fills it with the thought that the closeness they felt was maybe one-sided. I did not mean any of that. I never once meant any of that. But meaning and effect are two different things, and I spent far too long confusing them. My daughter called me 2 months ago. She calls every week. She always has. And I want to say again that she is a good woman, and I am proud of her in ways I should have said more often and more plainly when she was young enough that it might have settled into her differently. We talked for a while about ordinary things, her work, her children, something she had been reading. And then she went quiet for a moment and she said, "Dad, do you remember when I was about 14 and I came home one evening and I wouldn't tell you what was wrong?" I told her I remembered. She said she had been frightened that day. Something had happened at school, something that felt large and humiliating in the way that only things at 14 can feel. She had wanted to tell me. She had been sitting at the kitchen table hoping I would ask again, hoping I would sit down and wait her out. She said she had practically been willing me to try one more time. And I hadn't. I had taken her at her word, accepted the nothing, and moved on to something else. She wasn't saying it to wound me. Her voice was very calm, almost gentle. She said she had thought about it over the years, and she understood. She knew I hadn't meant to leave her there. But she said that was the night something shifted for her. That was the night she stopped expecting me to come and find her when she went quiet. And after that, she said, she stopped going quiet around me altogether, because it felt safer to just stay on the surface where things were easy and predictable and where she didn't have to wait and wonder. I didn't say much. What could I say? She was right. Everything she said was true. I just told her I wished I had sat down. I told her I was sorry I hadn't, and she said she knew, and I believe she meant it. But here is what stayed with me after that call. Here is what I keep turning over. She was 14 years old and she sat at that table and she made a decision about who I was and what she could expect from me. And she made that decision based on one evening, one moment where I accepted the nothing and walked away. One small silence. And she carried that decision quietly for decades. Built her understanding of our relationship around it. Adjusted herself to fit it. We think the small moments don't matter. We think the big ones are the ones that shape things. The arguments, the crises, the milestones. But in my experience, sitting here at 90 and thinking back through everything I know, it's the small ones that do the most lasting work. The small ones are the ones that happen too quietly to defend against. The ones nobody marks or names at the time. They just settle into people and become part of how those people understand the world. I was a small moment person without knowing it. I built everything important in my life out of the small moments, and not in the way I would have chosen. Ruth used to say that I was the most present absent person she had ever known. I asked her once what she meant by that. She said I was always physically there. Always reliable, never going anywhere. But there was a room inside me, she said, that she had never been allowed into. And she had spent a long time hoping I would open the door. And then she had spent a long time making peace with the fact that I probably wouldn't. And then she had just loved me anyway, around the closed door, which was its own kind of grace that I did not deserve nearly as much as I received it. I think about that room. I think about what was in it. Fear, probably. The ordinary fear of being truly known and found insufficient. The fear that if I let someone all the way in, they would see the parts I wasn't proud of, the uncertainties, the times I didn't know what I was doing, the grief I carried for my own father that I never fully processed, the loneliness I felt even in the middle of a full life that I never admitted to anyone, including myself. All of it sitting behind a door I kept closed because opening it felt like more than I knew how to do. And Ruth never got to see inside it. She died without ever getting in. And that is a sentence that I have to live with now, in the evenings, when the house is quiet, and there's nobody to perform being fine for. I'm not telling you this to make you sad. I'm telling you because I think most people have that room. I think it's very human to have it. And I think the question is not whether you have it, but whether you're willing to let someone in before it's too late. Before the person who most wanted to understand you is no longer there to understand. The time for it is not a special occasion. It's not a crisis or a deathbed or a milestone birthday. The time for it is a Tuesday evening. A phone call that doesn't have a purpose. A moment at the dinner table when someone asks you something and you could answer briefly and safely, or you could actually answer. The time is always ordinary. That's the part nobody tells you. The extraordinary connections are made out of ordinary moments, and you have to choose to take them seriously while they're happening. I had thousands of ordinary moments, thousands of Tuesdays, and I treated most of them like they were just time to get through on the way to something that mattered more. Nothing mattered more. I know that now. There was nothing more important waiting on the other side of all that getting through. This was it. The dinners and the evenings and the questions and the faces of the people who loved me asking to be let in. That was the whole thing. And I moved through so much of it looking slightly past it. My grandson visited me last spring. He's in his late 20s, has his whole life wide open in front of him. We sat outside in the afternoon and he asked me very sincerely what I would do differently. And I thought about it for a while before I answered, because I didn't want to give him the easy answer. The one that sounds wise but doesn't cost anything. I told him I would be less careful. That I would spend less time managing how I appeared and more time being honest about how I actually was. I told him that the careful version of himself, the one that says the right things and keeps the real things private, that version will not be who people miss when he's gone. They'll miss whoever is underneath that. And if he never lets them meet whoever is underneath, then he will have kept himself a secret from the people who most wanted to know him. And that is a particular kind of loneliness that takes decades to understand but only a lifetime of small silences to create. He listened carefully. He said thank you in a way that felt like he was really taking it in. I hope he does something with it. I hope he takes it home and thinks about it. I hope it costs him something comfortable and gives him something real in return. That is the trade in the end. That's what I was never willing to make. You give up the safety of the closed door, and you get, in return, the chance to actually be known. To have your children grow up understanding who their father really was. To have your partner reach the end of a life with you and feel that she knew you. That the years were full of something real. That the closeness was genuine and not just proximity. I chose the door. I kept it closed. And I had a life that was, in its way, a good one. Full of real things and real people who genuinely loved me. But there is a layer underneath the good life that I think about now. A layer of what it could have been, of how much fuller it might have felt, of how much less alone I might be in these last years, if I had just learned a little earlier that the silence was not protecting me, it was only ever costing me. If you have made it to the end of this, I want to say something to you directly. Not as advice, just as one person to another, from someone who has had a great deal of time to think about what the years added up to. If there is someone in your life you have been meaning to really talk to, not the surface talk, not the how are you and fine, but the actual conversation, the one where you say something true, I hope you find your way to it soon. Not because life is short, which it is, but because the longer you wait, the more ordinary the moment has to be, and the ordinary moments keep coming whether you use them or not. If something in what I said felt familiar, if you recognize something of yourself in the distance I kept, or in the silence I let grow, I just want you to know that recognition is worth paying attention to. It doesn't mean you've done everything wrong. It means you still have time to do something differently. And that is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. If you want to share what this brought up for you, I'd be glad to know. Not because I need to hear it, but because sometimes saying a thing out loud is how you begin to take it seriously. And whatever it is you need to take seriously, I hope you do, before the house gets too quiet, before the people you love become people you loved, while there's still a Tuesday left to use. That's all I have. I hope it was worth something to you. I hope you go home to whoever is waiting and you let them a little further in than you did yesterday. That's the whole thing. That was always the whole thing.